The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty general store, and Delilah Dawson clutched her daughter tighter as the driver shouted they had arrived in Shafter, Texas. Population barely 300 souls and dropping with each harsh summer. Through the grimy window, she saw a weathered sign swinging in the hot September wind, announcing the town that would either become her salvation or her tomb. Her arms ached from holding 4-year-old Emma for the last brutal hour of the journey, but she would not let go, not when everything she owned in this world fit into one battered carpet bag, and the child pressed against her chest. The year was 1879, and Delilah had left St. Louis with nothing but desperation, and a single letter from a man named Jack Lawson, a rancher who needed a wife and did not care that she came with complications. She stepped down from the coach onto the wooden planks, her worn boots barely holding together, and immediately the Texas heat pressed against her like a physical force. Emma whimpered and buried her face in Delilah's shoulder, her small hands clutching the fabric of the plain gray dress that had seen better days 3 years prior. A man stood outside the general store, tall and lean with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of strong coffee. He held his hat in his hands, turning it nervously, and when he saw Delilah, something flickered across his face that she could not quite read. Recognition, perhaps, though they had never met. He had sent a photograph with his letters, but the image had not captured the quiet strength in his shoulders or the way his jaw tightened when he was thinking hard about something. "Miss Dawson?" he asked, his voice rough from years of shouting orders across wide open spaces. He took a step forward, then seemed to notice Emma and stopped, his eyes widening slightly. "Mr. Lawson," Delilah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I apologize for not mentioning her in my letters. I was afraid you would refuse me if you knew." Jack stood silent for a long moment, studying both of them. Emma peeked out from Delilah's shoulder, her blue eyes curious despite her shyness. The little girl had her mother's dark hair but a lighter complexion, and she clutched a small cloth doll that had lost most of its stuffing somewhere between Missouri and Texas. "What is her name?" Jack asked finally, his voice softer now. "Emma. She is 4 years old. Her father died before she was born, and I have been working in a laundry house to keep us fed. But the owner sold the business, and the new man wanted to hire younger girls without children slowing them down." Delilah lifted her chin, refusing to apologize for her circumstances even as fear twisted in her stomach. "If you want to send me back, I will understand, but I ask that you at least let us rest one night before we face that journey again." Jack moved closer, and Delilah caught the scent of leather and horse and something clean like soap. He looked at Emma again, and the little girl surprised them both by smiling at him, a gap-toothed grin that transformed her anxious face into something bright and hopeful. "Well now," Jack said, and the corner of his mouth lifted. "I reckon a ranch can always use more people who know how to smile like that." He reached out and gently touched Emma's hand. "You hungry, little miss?" Emma nodded shyly. "Me too." "What do you say we get your mama settled and find something to eat? My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, makes biscuits that will make you think you have died and gone straight to heaven." He looked at Delilah then, and his eyes were warm despite the lines of hard living that creased the corners. "I am not in the habit of turning away people who need help, and I am not so proud that I cannot admit when circumstances change my plans for the better." Delilah felt something unknot in her chest, though she kept her expression carefully neutral. She had learned not to trust easy kindness, but she also had no other options. "Thank you. I will work hard. I can cook and clean and sew, and I know how to tend a garden. I will earn my place here." "I am sure you will," Jack said simply. He picked up her carpetbag with one hand as if it weighed nothing, then gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby. The ranch is about 5 miles out. It is not much, but it is home. The wagon ride gave Delilah her first real look at the man who had agreed to marry her through letters, exchanged over 4 months. Jack handled the horses with easy confidence, and he pointed out landmarks along the way, his voice patient as he explained where the property lines ran and which neighbors could be trusted. Emma fell asleep against Delilah's side, exhausted from the long journey, and Delilah found herself relaxing incrementally as Jack talked. "I should tell you about the ranch," Jack said as they bounced along the rutted road. "It is not a big operation. I have about 500 head of cattle, 3 horses, and a dog named Rusty who thinks he is still a puppy even though he is pushing 10 years old. I have 2 hired men who help with the cattle, and Mrs. Chen keeps the house running. She is from San Francisco originally, came out here with her husband 20 years ago. He died 5 years back, and she needed work, so now she cooks and manages things when I am out on the range. It sounds like you have built something good here," Delilah said carefully. Jack was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the reins. "I have tried. My parents started this ranch back in 1853 before the war. They both died during a cholera outbreak in '67, left it to me and my brother. He wanted to go back east, said this land was too hard and would kill us all eventually, so I bought out his share and I have been working it alone since then." He glanced at her sidelong. "It gets lonely out here. That is why I put the advertisement in the paper." "I understand lonely," Delilah said softly. She looked down at Emma's sleeping face. "After Emma's father died, I thought I would never feel anything but lonely again. But then she was born, and I realized I had to keep going for her. Everything I have done since then has been to give her a better life than I had." "What happened to your family?" Jack asked, his voice gentle. "My parents died when I was 16. Fever took them both within a week of each other. I had no other family, so I found work where I could. Met Emma's father when I was 17. He was a good man, a clerk at a law office, and we were going to marry as soon as he saved enough for a proper wedding. Then there was an accident at the docks. He was walking past when a load of timber broke free and he was crushed. He never even knew I was carrying Emma." Delilah kept her voice even, though the memories still carried sharp edges. "His family wanted nothing to do with me once he was gone. Said I was probably lying about the child being his, trying to get money from them." Jack's jaw tightened. "That is a cruel thing to do to someone grieving. People protect their own interests first," Delilah said with a shrug that was meant to look casual but felt heavy. "I learned that early. So when I saw your advertisement, I thought perhaps out here, away from all those small-minded people, Emma and I might have a chance at something better." "You will," Jack said with quiet certainty. "I give you my word on that." The ranch appeared as they crested a low hill, and Delilah felt her breath catch despite herself. It was not grand, nothing like the painted pictures of mansions she had seen in shop windows back in St. Louis, but it was solid and real. The main house was built of wood that had weathered to a soft gray, with a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. A barn stood behind it, larger than the house, and several smaller outbuildings dotted the property. Corrals held horses, and in the distance, she could see cattle grazing across rolling grassland that stretched to meet the enormous Texas sky. "It is beautiful," Delilah said, and meant it. Jack looked pleased, a flush creeping up his neck. "It needs work. The porch has some loose boards, and the roof over the north bedroom leaks when it rains hard. But it is sturdy, and it will keep you safe." A woman emerged from the house as they pulled up, wiping her hands on her apron. She was small and compact, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp eyes that took in everything at once. This had to be Mrs. Chen, and Delilah straightened her spine, preparing to be judged. "You brought company," Mrs. Chen said, her English flavored with an accent that softened the hard consonants. "This is Delilah Dawson and her daughter Emma," Jack said, climbing down from the wagon. "They will be staying with us." Mrs. Chen looked at Delilah for a long moment, then at Emma, who had woken and was watching everything with wide eyes. Something in the older woman's expression softened. "The child looks hungry. Come inside. I have stew." Jack helped Delilah down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist, and for a moment they stood close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. He stepped back quickly, his ears going red, and grabbed her carpet bag. "I will show you where you will sleep. I figure you and Emma can take the main bedroom, and I will bunk out in the small room off the kitchen. It is not proper for us to share space until we have had a proper wedding." "You still want to marry me?" Delilah asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "Even with Emma?" "I asked you to come here to be my wife," Jack said simply. "The fact that you have a daughter does not change that. If anything, it makes me think you are probably stronger than half the men I know, to have survived what you have and still keep going." He looked down at Emma, who was holding Delilah's hand and watching him with those big blue eyes. "And I have always wanted children. I just figured they would come after the wedding, but life does not always follow the plan we set out, does it?" Emma tugged on Jack's sleeve, and when he crouched down to her level, she whispered something Delilah could not hear. Jack's face broke into a genuine smile, the kind that reached his eyes and made him look younger than his 32 years. "Yes, I promise you can meet the dog," he said seriously. "And the horses too, if your mama says it is all right. But first, we eat, because Mrs. Chen gets cranky when people let her cooking get cold." Inside, the house was simpler than Delilah had expected, but clean and well-maintained. The main room held a large table, several chairs, and a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. Doorways led off to what she assumed were bedrooms, and a ladder climbed to a loft space above. Everything was made of solid wood, built to last, and while there were no fancy decorations, it felt like a place where people actually lived rather than just existed. Mrs. Chen ladled stew into bowls, and Emma climbed onto a chair that was almost too big for her, her feet swinging several inches above the floor. Jack sat across from them, and Delilah found herself watching the way he moved, economical and sure, no wasted motion. He caught her looking and smiled, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. The stew was excellent, thick with beef and vegetables, and Delilah could not remember the last time she had eaten something so satisfying. Emma made happy sounds between bites, and Mrs. Chen kept refilling her bowl without being asked, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You cook?" Mrs. Chen asked Delilah bluntly. "Yes, though probably not as well as you. You sew?" "Yes. I took in mending work when the laundry was slow." Mrs. Chen nodded, apparently satisfied. "Good. This man tears his shirts on barbed wire every other week. I am tired of fixing them." Jack protested, but there was laughter in his voice, and Delilah realized this was how they showed affection here, through teasing and practical help rather than flowery words. It was different from what she had known in St. Louis, but she thought she could learn to appreciate it. After the meal, Jack showed them to the bedroom. It was spacious, with a real bed that had a frame and a mattress filled with something other than straw. A washstand stood in one corner, and windows on 2 walls let in light and air. It was the finest room Delilah had slept in since her parents died, and she had to swallow hard against the sudden swell of emotion. "I know it is not much," Jack started, but Delilah cut him off. "It is perfect, thank you," he nodded, looking relieved. "There is water in the pitcher, and Mrs. Chen put out fresh towels. If you need anything, I will be right through that door." He pointed to a door on the far wall. "It connects to the kitchen area where I will be sleeping. Just knock if Emma needs something in the night or if you hear anything that worries you." "What would I hear that would worry me?" Delilah asked, suddenly alert. "Nothing dangerous," Jack said quickly. "But sometimes coyotes get close to the house, or the wind kicks up strange sounds. I just want you to feel safe here." After he left, Delilah helped Emma wash up and change into a nightgown that was getting too small. She would need to sew new clothes for both of them, she thought, adding it to the mental list of tasks she needed to accomplish to prove her worth here. Emma climbed into the big bed and curled up like a kitten, her eyes already closing. "Mama," she murmured sleepily. "I like it here. Mr. Jack is nice." "Yes, he seems to be," Delilah agreed, smoothing her daughter's hair back from her forehead. "Will he be my papa now?" Delilah's throat tightened. "Would you like that?" "Yes," Emma said simply, and then she was asleep, her breathing evening out into the soft rhythm of childhood dreams. Delilah sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around her. She heard Jack's voice outside, talking to someone, probably one of the hired men. She heard horses nickering in the corral and the distant lowing of cattle. She heard the wind moving through grass, a sound like the world breathing. For the first time in years, she let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, she had made the right choice. Over the next few days, Delilah threw herself into learning everything she could about the ranch and her role in it. Mrs. Chen taught her where things were kept, how Jack liked his coffee, and which of the hired men could be trusted with anything and which needed constant supervision. The two men were named Pete and Samuel, both in their early 20s, and they treated Delilah with awkward courtesy and Emma with the kind of gentle patience usually reserved for baby animals. Jack worked from sunup to sundown, checking fences, moving cattle, and handling the 100 other tasks that kept a ranch running. But every evening, he made time to sit with Emma, teaching her to identify birds by their calls or showing her how to whistle through a blade of grass. He never ignored Delilah in these moments, always including her in the conversation, asking her opinion on matters large and small. On the fourth day, he found her in the garden behind the house, pulling weeds from between rows of vegetables that Mrs. Chen had planted earlier in the season. The sun was high and hot, and Delilah had tied a scarf over her hair to keep it from her face. She did not hear him approach until his shadow fell across her work. "You do not have to do that," he said, offering her a hand up. "That is my job." "You have enough to do," Delilah replied, accepting his help and brushing dirt from her skirt. "Besides, I like working with growing things. It makes me feel useful." Jack studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You have been here less than a week, and already Mrs. Chen says she does not know how she managed without you. The house has never been so organized, and I have more mended shirts than I know what to do with. I told you I would work hard." "You did, but I did not expect you to work yourself to exhaustion." He gestured toward the porch. "Come sit in the shade for a minute. I want to talk to you about something." Anxiety spiked through Delilah's chest, but she followed him to the porch, where they sat on the steps side by side. Emma was visible through the open door, helping Mrs. Chen roll out dough for biscuits, her small hands covered in flour. "I have been thinking about the wedding," Jack said, turning his hat in his hands the same way he had the day they met. "I know we agreed to marry, but I do not want you to feel rushed. If you need more time to get to know me to make sure this is what you want, I understand." Delilah looked at him in surprise. Are you having second thoughts? No, he said firmly. Not even a little, but I want you to be sure. I want you to marry me because you want to, not because you have nowhere else to go. It was perhaps the kindest thing anyone had said to her in years, and Delilah felt her eyes sting with unexpected tears. She blinked them back, determined to keep her composure. I want to marry you, she said quietly. Not because I am desperate, though I will not lie and say that was not part of why I answered your advertisement, but because in 4 days you have shown me more respect and kindness than I have known in years. You have been patient with Emma, generous with us both, and you have not once made me feel like a burden. So yes, I want to marry you, Jack Lawson, whenever you are ready. Jack's face lit up and he reached out to take her hand, his palm calloused but warm. How about Sunday? That gives us 3 days to prepare. The circuit preacher comes through Shafter once a month and he will be there this weekend. We could go into town, make it official, maybe even have a small celebration afterward. That sounds perfect, Delilah said, and found she meant it. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Mrs. Chen produced a dress that had belonged to her daughter, who had married and moved to California years before. It was made of soft blue cotton, simple but well made, and with only minor alterations. It fit Delilah as if it had been sewn for her. Jack rode into town and returned with new boots for Emma, and a small bouquet of dried flowers that must have cost him more than he could easily spare. On Saturday evening, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jack asked Delilah to walk with him. Emma was already asleep, exhausted from a day spent chasing chickens and playing with Rusty, who had indeed proved to be an overgrown puppy in an old dog's body. Mrs. Chen shooed them out of the house with instructions not to rush back, and Delilah found herself alone with Jack for the first time since she arrived. They walked toward the barn, not speaking at first, just enjoying the cool evening air after another scorching day. Jack stopped by the corral fence, leaning his arms on the top rail and looking out at the darkening landscape. I want to tell you something, he said finally, about why I never married before now. Delilah waited, sensing this was important. After my brother left and my parents died, I was so focused on keeping this place running that I did not have time for much else. There were a few girls in town who made it clear they were interested, but none of them seemed right. They wanted a man who would give them a house in town, store-bought dresses, a life that did not involve mucking out stalls and worrying about drought. He turned to look at her, his eyes serious. Then I realized I was looking for the wrong things. I did not need someone who wanted an easy life. I needed someone who understood that hard work is part of building something that matters. Is that why you sent for a mail-order bride instead of courting someone local? Delilah asked. Partly, but also because I wanted a fresh start. Someone who did not know me as the Lawson boy, who did not have expectations based on who my parents were or what this ranch used to be. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so gentle that Delilah held her breath. When you stepped off that stagecoach, holding Emma and looking like you had fought your way through hell but refused to give up, I knew I had made the right choice. You are exactly what I did not know I needed. Jack, Delilah whispered, but she did not know what else to say. Tomorrow, when we stand in front of the preacher, I want you to know that I am not just marrying you because I need a wife or because you need a husband. I am marrying you because even in these few days, I have come to care for you and Emma deeply. I know it is too soon for love, but I think we could get there, given time. Delilah felt tears slip down her cheeks, and she did not bother to wipe them away. I think we could too. Jack cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was Delilah's first kiss since Emma's father died, and it felt like coming home after a long journey. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Sunday dawned clear and hot, perfect weather for a wedding even if it made the ride into Shafter uncomfortable. Delilah wore the blue dress, and Emma wore a new pinafore that Mrs. Chen had somehow found time to make. Jack wore his best shirt, his hair slicked back with water, and he drove the wagon with a careful precision that made Delilah wonder if he was as nervous as she was. The church in Shafter was small, just a simple building with a cross on top, but it was clean and cool inside. The preacher was an older man with kind eyes and a voice that could probably be heard across half of Texas when he was preaching fire and brimstone. He seemed pleased to have a wedding to perform instead of a funeral, which he said was mostly what he did these days in these small towns where life was hard and short. Pete and Samuel had ridden in earlier and stood as witnesses, both of them scrubbed clean and looking uncomfortable in clothes that did not smell like horses and cattle. Mrs. Chen sat in the front pew with Emma, who clutched her doll and watched everything with wide eyes. The ceremony was brief, just the essential words that bound two lives together in the eyes of God and the law. When the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Jack did so with a tenderness that made Delilah's heart skip. Emma clapped, and the sound echoed in the small space, making everyone laugh. They signed the papers that made it official, and then they were married, Delilah Lawson now instead of Delilah Dawson. Her name changed, but her determination unchanged. They had a meal at the boarding house, the closest thing Shafter had to a restaurant, and the owner gave them a discount when she heard it was a wedding celebration. Emma fell asleep with her head on the table, worn out from excitement, and Jack carried her to the wagon with the ease of someone who had been carrying children all his life. The ride back to the ranch felt different somehow, charged with new possibility. Delilah was acutely aware of the ring on her finger, a simple gold band that Jack had produced from somewhere, and the fact that she was now truly and legally bound to this man she barely knew but was beginning to trust. That night, after Emma was tucked into the big bed in what was now their shared room, Jack stood in the doorway, uncertain. "I can still sleep in the kitchen if you want," he offered. "I do not want to rush you into anything you are not ready for." Delilah crossed the room and took his hand. "We are married now. You belong here." What happened between them that night was private and tender, two people learning each other slowly, carefully, with patience and growing affection. Jack was gentle, constantly checking that she was all right, and Delilah found herself relaxing into his touch, letting go of old fears and old pain. It was not the passionate romance of dime novels, but it was real and honest and good. The months that followed settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly like home. Delilah learned the patterns of ranch life, the seasonal changes that dictated what needed to be done and when. She learned to make Mrs. Chen's biscuits and to mend fences alongside Jack when extra hands were needed. She learned which of the horses was gentle enough for Emma to pet, and which areas of the property were safe for a curious 4-year-old to explore. Emma bloomed in the wide open spaces, her shyness melting away as she grew more confident. Jack taught her to ride on an old mare named Daisy, leading them around the corral while Delilah watched with her heart in her throat. He taught her to recognize animal tracks in the dust and how to collect eggs from the chickens without getting pecked. He read to her every night before bed, his deep voice turning simple stories into grand adventures. Delilah watched the bond between them grow, and something inside her that had been tight and afraid for so long began to loosen. She had been so worried that no man would ever accept Emma, that they would always be seen as a burden or a problem to be solved. But Jack loved Emma with the same fierce protectiveness he showed toward everything under his care. And Emma responded by calling him Papa within a month of the wedding, as naturally as if he had always been there. Winter came, mild by northern standards, but cold enough that they had to bring the cattle closer to the house and worry about water freezing in the troughs. Jack taught Delilah to shoot, insisting she needed to know how to protect herself and Emma if something happened while he was out on the range. She proved to be a decent shot, much to her own surprise, and Jack looked ridiculously proud when she hit the target 3 times out of 5. One evening in late December, as they sat by the fire after Emma had gone to bed, Delilah worked on a piece of embroidery while Jack oiled his saddle. It was domestic and peaceful, the kind of evening she had dreamed about but never quite believed she would have. "I have been thinking," Jack said, not looking up from his work. "The ranch is doing well, better than it has in years, actually. I think it is because I am not trying to do everything alone anymore." "You have always had Pete and Samuel," Delilah pointed out. "I mean in the house. Having you here, having Emma's laughter, having Mrs. Chen less grumpy because she has help now. It makes coming back from a long day seem worthwhile." He set aside the saddle and moved to sit beside her on the small sofa. "What I am trying to say is thank you for taking a chance on me, for coming all this way, for bringing everything I did not know I was missing." Delilah set down her embroidery and took his hand. "I am the one who should be thanking you. You saved us, Jack. You gave us a home and a future and a family." "We saved each other," Jack said firmly, "and we are building that future together." He kissed her and Delilah melted into it, still marveling at how safe she felt with this man, how cherished. When they pulled apart, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said quietly. "I have been trying to find the right time to say it, but I realize there is no perfect moment. I just need you to know." Joy burst through Delilah's chest like sunshine. "I love you too. I have for weeks, but I was afraid to say it first." They held each other close, the fire crackling beside them, and outside, the Texas night was vast and full of stars. Spring brought new challenges and new joys. A late freeze killed some of the early crops, but Jack and Delilah replanted together, working side by side in the garden. Emma helped, her small hands patting dirt over seeds with intense concentration. The cattle calved successfully, adding to the herd, and Jack hired another hand to help manage the growing operation. Delilah discovered she was pregnant in April, the realization coming slowly as she missed her monthly courses and began feeling queasy in the mornings. She told Mrs. Chen first, needing another woman to confirm what she suspected, and the older woman's face broke into a rare, genuine smile. "Jack will be so happy," Mrs. Chen said, patting Delilah's hand. "He has always wanted children of his own." "He has Emma," Delilah protested, "and he loves her like his own blood, but this baby will be part of both of you, proof that you are building something new together." Mrs. Chen squeezed her hand. "Tell him tonight. He deserves to know." Delilah was nervous all day, though she could not say why. She knew Jack would be happy about the baby, but some old fear whispered that it would change things, that he would somehow love Emma less once he had a biological child. It was irrational, but fear often was. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Delilah found Jack in the barn, checking on a horse that had thrown a shoe earlier in the day. She watched him work for a moment, admiring the competent way he moved, the gentleness he showed the animal. "Jack," she called softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up, immediately alert to the nervousness in her voice. "What is wrong? Is Emma all right?" "Emma is fine. Everyone is fine." Delilah stepped closer, twisting her hands together. "I need to tell you something." Jack set down the horse's hoof and came to her, his eyes searching her face. You are scaring me a little. Do not be scared. It is good news. At least I hope you will think it is good news." She took a breath and said it quickly before she lost her nerve. "I am going to have a baby, in late autumn, I think, maybe early winter." For a moment, Jack just stared at her, and Delilah's heart sank. But then his face transformed, joy lighting him up from the inside, and he let out a whoop that startled the horses. He picked Delilah up and spun her around, laughing, then set her down carefully as if suddenly remembering she was fragile. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to have a baby." "You are not upset?" Delilah asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "Upset? Delilah, I could not be happier. This is everything. You and Emma and now a baby. This is everything I have ever wanted." He cupped her face in his hands. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this." "I think we both had a role in making this happen," Delilah said, smiling through tears of relief and happiness. Jack laughed and kissed her, and any lingering fears Delilah had melted away in the face of his uncomplicated joy. Telling Emma was nerve-wracking in a different way. Delilah worried that her daughter would feel displaced or jealous, that she would somehow feel less important with a new baby coming. But Emma surprised her, as children often do. "Will the baby sleep in our room?" Emma asked, her face serious. "For a while, yes," Delilah confirmed. "Until the baby is bigger. Good. Then I can help take care of it." Emma nodded decisively. "I will be a very good big sister. Papa Jack says being responsible is important." Jack ruffled Emma's hair, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You will be the best big sister any baby could ask for." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though the summer heat was brutal. Delilah moved slowly through her chores, grateful for Mrs. Chen's help and Jack's insistence that she rest more. Jack became even more protective, constantly worrying about whether she was eating enough, drinking enough water, getting enough sleep. It was overwhelming sometimes, but Delilah appreciated the care behind it. Emma adjusted to the idea of a sibling with enthusiasm, constantly talking to Delilah's growing belly and bringing her things she thought the baby would like. Rocks with interesting shapes, wildflowers from the field, once a very confused beetle that Jack had to coax back outside. It was sweet and funny, and made Delilah love her daughter even more fiercely. In late August, a neighboring rancher stopped by with news that a gang of rustlers had been spotted 2 counties over, making their way through the area and stealing cattle. Jack increased the patrols, and he and his hired men took turns watching the herd at night. Delilah hated having him gone after dark, especially as her belly grew larger and moving became more difficult. One night in early September, Delilah woke to the sound of gunshots in the distance. Her heart leaped into her throat and she struggled out of bed, moving to the window. Emma stirred but did not wake, and Delilah was grateful for that small mercy. She could see lights moving near the cattle pens, hear men shouting, and every instinct screamed at her to run to Jack, to make sure he was safe. But she had Emma to think about, and the baby she carried, so she stayed in the house, the rifle Jack had taught her to use propped near the door just in case. Mrs. Chen appeared, fully dressed despite the late hour, and the 2 women waited together in tense silence. It felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes before Jack came through the door, dusty and tired but unharmed. Relief made Delilah's knees weak. "The rustlers?" she asked. "Gone. We ran them off and Pete winged one of them with a lucky shot. I do not think they will come back." Jack pulled her into a careful hug, mindful of her belly. "I am sorry I scared you. Just promise me you will always come back," Delilah whispered against his chest. "Always," Jack promised. "I have too much to live for now to be careless." The baby came on a cold November night, arriving 3 weeks earlier than expected. Delilah's water broke while she was helping Mrs. Chen prepare dinner, and the contractions started soon after, hard and fast. Jack rode into Shafter at breakneck speed to fetch the doctor, but the baby was not interested in waiting. Mrs. Chen proved to be an experienced midwife, calm and competent, as she talked Delilah through the pain. Emma stayed with Pete and Samuel in the bunkhouse, carefully sheltered from her mother's cries. Jack held Delilah's hand and let her squeeze until she thought his bones would break, his face pale but determined to be there for every moment. The baby was a boy, small but healthy, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced his arrival to anyone within a mile. Jack cut the cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son for the first time. "He is perfect," Jack said, his voice cracking. "You are perfect. I cannot believe you did this." Delilah, exhausted but elated, watched as Jack held the baby with infinite tenderness, this man who worked with horses and cattle and rough men showing such softness with the tiny life in his arms. They named him James after Jack's father, and Emma was allowed in to meet her baby brother once everything was cleaned up. She approached with wide eyes, staring at the small red face peeking out from the blanket. "He is very little," she observed. "You were this little once," Delilah told her. Emma touched James's tiny hand with one careful finger, and the baby's fingers curled reflexively around hers. Emma's face lit up with wonder. "He likes me." "Of course he does," Jack said, putting his arm around Emma. "You are his big sister. You are going to teach him everything important." Watching Jack with both children, seeing the love in his eyes as he looked at his expanding family, Delilah felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what she had risked everything for, what she had traveled across half a country to find. A home. A family. A man who saw her and Emma not as a burden but as a blessing. The winter was busy with a new baby in the house, but they managed. James proved to be a good sleeper once he got past the first few weeks, and Emma took her role as big sister seriously, always wanting to help. Jack was besotted with his son, spending whatever free time he had holding the boy and talking to him about the ranch, about horses and cattle and the land that would be his someday. But he never neglected Emma, always making sure she knew she was just as important, just as loved. Delilah watched him carefully in those early months, looking for any sign that he saw Emma differently now that he had a biological child, but there was none. He loved both children with equal devotion, and Emma never seemed to doubt her place in his heart. Spring came again, and with it, new growth everywhere. The garden flourished under Delilah's care, the cattle herd continued to grow, and James started smiling and cooing, becoming a person instead of just a needy bundle. Emma turned 5 and learned to write her name. The ranch prospered, and with it, the family prospered. One evening in late May, almost 2 years after Delilah had arrived in Shafter with nothing but a carpetbag and a daughter and more hope than sense, she stood on the porch with Jack, watching Emma chase fireflies in the dusk while James slept against Jack's shoulder. "You ever regret it?" Jack asked quietly. "Leaving St. Louis, coming out here to marry a stranger?" Delilah looked at him in surprise. "Never, not for a single moment. Do you regret sending for a mail-order bride?" "No. But I did not know you would come with a child, and I wondered sometimes if that changed things for you. If you wished, I had been the fairy tale prince who swept you away instead of just a rancher who needed help." "Jack Lawson," Delilah said firmly, turning to face him fully. "You are exactly the prince I needed. Not some fantasy from a story, but a real man who showed up and kept showing up, who loved my daughter as your own, who gave us a home and a future. You told me once that I brought you everything you needed, but you brought us everything we needed too." Jack shifted James to one arm and pulled Delilah close with the other. "I love you, both of you, all of you. I cannot imagine my life without this family." "Then do not imagine it," Delilah said, smiling up at him. "Just live it with us every day for as long as we have." "That is the easiest promise I have ever made," Jack said, and kissed her as the last light faded from the Texas sky and Emma's laughter rang out like music across the land they called home. The years rolled on, bringing changes as all years do. Emma grew tall and smart, learning to ride like she had been born on horseback. James became a sturdy toddler and then a rambunctious little boy who followed his father everywhere, mimicking the way Jack walked and talked. The ranch continued to grow, and Jack added more land, hired more men, built a new barn. In the summer of 1882, Delilah gave birth to another daughter, a tiny thing they named Rose, who had Jack's brown eyes and Delilah's stubborn chin. Emma, now 7, was invaluable help with the baby, and James, nearly 3, was fascinated by his new sister, always wanting to touch her soft hair and make her smile. The family expanded in other ways too. Pete got married to a girl from town and built a small house on the ranch property, staying on as Jack's foreman. Samuel moved on to start his own spread further south, and they hired new hands to replace him. Mrs. Chen's daughter came for an extended visit and ended up staying, bringing her 2 children and adding more life and noise to the ranch. Through it all, Jack and Delilah grew closer, their partnership deepening into something unshakable. They argued sometimes about money or how to handle the children or which fields to plant, but they always talked it through, always came back to each other. They learned each other's rhythms, the way married couples do when they choose each other every day instead of just on their wedding day. On their 5th anniversary, Jack surprised Delilah with a trip to San Antonio, just the 2 of them, leaving the children with Mrs. Chen and Pete's wife. It was the first time they had been alone together for more than a few hours since James was born, and it felt like a honeymoon, exploring the city, eating in restaurants, sleeping late in a hotel bed. "I never thought I could be this happy," Delilah confessed one night as they walked along the river that wound through the city. "I used to think happiness was something other people had, people who were luckier or better than me somehow." "You deserve every bit of happiness you have," Jack said fiercely. "You have worked for it, earned it, built it with your own hands. Never forget that." "I try not to. But sometimes I wake up and I am afraid it is all a dream, that I will open my eyes and be back in that laundry in St. Louis and none of this will be real." Jack stopped walking and pulled her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "It is real. I am real. Our children are real. The life we have built is real, and it is not going anywhere." Delilah believed him, and when they returned to the ranch, to the chaos of children and animals and the endless work, she felt renewed, ready to face whatever came next. What came next was prosperity, hard-won but lasting. The ranch became known for producing quality cattle, and Jack was able to command better prices at market. He put the extra money into improvements, better equipment, a new house for the foreman, eventually an addition onto the main house that gave each of the children their own room and added a proper dining room for when they had company. Emma grew into a beautiful young woman, smart and capable, and by the time she was 16, young men from surrounding ranches started finding excuses to visit. Jack was hilariously protective, interrogating each potential suitor until Delilah had to intervene. Eventually, Emma settled on a steady young man named Thomas who worked on a neighboring ranch, and they were married in 1890, a big celebration that brought together people from all over the county. James, at 11, stood up with his father as Emma got married, and he looked so grown up in his suit that Delilah cried. Rose, at 8, was the flower girl, serious and careful as she walked down the aisle scattering petals. It was a perfect day, bittersweet in the way all perfect days are when they mark change. But Emma did not go far, settling on the neighboring ranch with Thomas, and she visited often, eventually bringing grandchildren for Jack and Delilah to spoil. James grew into a young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, learning everything he could about running the operation. Rose proved to have a talent for numbers, and started keeping the ranch's books when she was just 14, her careful accounting helping Jack see where they could improve efficiency. Through droughts and good years, through the death of beloved animals and the birth of new ones, through the aging of friends and the arrival of new neighbors, the family persisted. Jack's hair turned gray at the temples, and Delilah found lines around her eyes that had not been there before, but they wore their age well, proud of what they had built. In 1895, when they had been married 16 years, Jack and Delilah sat on the porch they had sat on countless times before. Emma's children were playing in the yard, James was out checking fences, and Rose was inside helping Mrs. Chen, who was now ancient but still insisted on cooking Sunday dinners. "You remember the day you arrived?" Jack asked, taking Delilah's hand. "Every detail. I was terrified. I thought you would send me back to St. Louis when you saw Emma." "I thought I was the luckiest man alive when I saw you both," Jack corrected. "I still think that. We have had a good life," Delilah said contentedly, "the best life. And it is not over yet. We have years left, God willing." "What do you want to do with those years?" Delilah asked curiously. Exactly this. Sit here with you, watch our family grow, work the land, love you every day. That is all I need." "That is all I need too," Delilah agreed, "though maybe a few more grandchildren would not hurt." Jack laughed, the sound rich and full. "I will see what I can do about that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over land they had worked and loved and defended. Emma's children ran shrieking after fireflies, just as their mother had done years before. The cattle lowed in the distance. Somewhere, a horse whinnied. The world turned and the ranch endured. The years continued their steady march. James married a sweet girl from town when he was 22, and they built a house on the far side of the property, staying close but independent. They had 3 children in quick succession, a daughter and 2 sons, and Jack delighted in teaching them to ride just as he had taught Emma and James and Rose. Rose, surprising everyone, announced at 18 that she wanted to go to college to study business and mathematics. Jack and Delilah scraped together the money to send her to a women's college in Austin, proud and terrified in equal measure. She came home for summers and holidays, full of new ideas and enthusiasm, and she used her education to help expand the ranch's operations, finding new markets and more efficient practices. In 1900, as the new century began, the ranch was more successful than Jack had ever dreamed possible. What had started as a struggling operation run by one man alone was now a thriving enterprise that employed 15 people and supported multiple families. The Lawson name was respected throughout the county, known for honest dealing and quality livestock. But more than the material success, Jack and Delilah treasured the family they had built. Sunday dinners saw the table crowded with children and grandchildren, laughter and storytelling, the kind of chaotic joy that comes from people who genuinely love being together. Emma's oldest daughter looked just like the Emma who had arrived on that stagecoach 21 years ago, shy and wide-eyed but full of potential. Jack, now 53, had slowed down a bit, letting James handle more of the day-to-day operations, but he was still vital and engaged, still the heart of the ranch. Delilah, at 41, had laugh lines and silver threading through her dark hair, but she moved with the confidence of a woman who knew her place in the world and was content with it. One evening, as they prepared for bed, Jack watched Delilah brush out her hair at the vanity he had bought her years ago. She caught him looking and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how you changed my life," Jack said simply. "About how I was just surviving before you came, going through the motions, and then suddenly I was living. Really living." Delilah set down her brush and came to sit beside him on the bed. "You changed mine too. You saved me and Emma when I had nowhere else to turn. You gave us more than just a home. You gave us belonging." "I need you to know something," Jack said, taking both her hands in his. "If I could go back and live my life over, I would not change a single thing. Not the hard times, not the struggles, nothing. Because it all led to you stepping off that stage coach with Emma in your arms and hope in your eyes. That was the moment everything became worth it." Delilah's eyes filled with tears. "I love you so much, more now than I did on our wedding day, and I did not think that was possible." "Love grows," Jack said, pulling her close. "If you tend it right, if you work at it, it grows deeper and stronger every year." They lay down together, wrapped in each other's arms, and outside, the ranch settled into its nightly rhythms. In the houses scattered across the property, their children and grandchildren slept. In the barn, horses shifted in their stalls. In the fields, cattle rested under the vast Texas sky. As Delilah drifted toward sleep, she thought about that terrified young woman who had arrived with a carpetbag and a child, gambling everything on a man she had never met. She thought about how Jack had looked at her that first day, how he had smiled at Emma, how he had said simply, "I reckon a ranch can always use more people who know how to smile like that." He had been right, but it went deeper than that. A ranch needed people who were willing to work for what they wanted, who understood that building something worthwhile took time and effort and unwavering commitment. It needed people who could weather storms and celebrate good fortune with equal grace. It needed love and laughter and the kind of stubborn hope that refused to give up even when things looked impossible. Delilah and Jack had brought those things to each other, and together they had built something that would last long after they were gone. The ranch would pass to James and his children, and to Emma's and Rose's children if they wanted it. The Lawson name would continue, tied to this land, these cattle, this corner of Texas that had become home. But more important than the land or the cattle or the name was the love that had started it all. A desperate woman, a lonely man, and the courage it took to reach for something better. A mail-order bride who arrived with a child and hope, and a cowboy who recognized that she brought everything he needed. It was a simple story in many ways, the kind that played out across the West in countless variations. But for Jack and Delilah, it was their story, unique and precious and worth every struggle along the way. As sleep finally claimed them both, their last waking thoughts were of gratitude, for each other, for their family, for the life they had built from nothing but determination and faith and love that grew deeper with every passing year. The ranch slept around them, secure and prospering, a testament to what two people could build when they chose each other, every day, through everything life threw at them. And in the morning, they would wake up and do it all again, because that was what love meant. Not just the passionate moments, though there were plenty of those, but the steady, daily choice to be there, to show up, to keep building something beautiful together. That was the real happy ending. Not a moment, but a lifetime. Not perfection, but persistence. Not a fairy tale, but something better and truer and more lasting. A family. A home. a love that endured through decades and would echo forward through generations. The mail-order bride and the lonely cowboy had found everything they needed in each other, and they had made sure to cherish it, nurture it, and pass it on to their children and grandchildren. The end of their story was really just another beginning, the continuation of something started on a dusty September day in 1879, when hope and need had collided and created something neither could have imagined alone. They had built a legacy of love, and that was the best ending of all.